Hello and welcome back to the Tree of Life podcast. It's an exciting month. It's the time of Samhain. And I know it's exciting because Google search trends are up on the topic of Samhain. But that's not the reason we're talking about it. It's because we've been doing this for a while, and we basically every single month we talk about the time of year, the time of the seasons and what this means. And obviously with the month of October, this is a lot of people's favorite time of year because it's officially spooky season. Kubi, are you excited for spooky season?
I am very excited for spooky season. I am indeed. I've got pumpkins around the fire in my house and feeling pretty spooky.
How do you sell, like, to you, what well, first off, let's go back in time. Let's meet young Kubi. What
Oh,
yeah. Well, I saw that one picture online of you with like the blue hair at like a rave. That was very confusing to the person I know now.
a lot can change in a few years. Yeah.
Glastonbury changed you.
Yeah.
But have you always liked the autumn season? Like Halloween, Samhain? Yeah, what's your experience with this time of year been?
Wow. I remember being very young and my parents weren't into me doing the trick or treating here. They thought it was very unfair on the old people. So I think I remember us repeatedly knocking on our own front door and my dad giving us either tricks or treats. So I had quite a naive start to Halloween and what it all meant. And I think Samhain, the first time I heard that was, actually quite late on in my late 20s. And I suddenly started to connect dots with, this kind of commercialized things that we've been calling Halloween actually has its roots in something much, much older. Um, but I quite like autumn. I always think that I don't, but then when I'm in it, I'm like, yeah, autumn. Like I love the pumpkin spice lattes and the crispy leaves. And I like layering up. I like wearing lots of different layers and getting cozy around the fire. So I'm fairly at peace with the season. But the last few years, I would say the last sort of 7 years, I have made a conscious effort to connect with the ancestors and to really explore what it is and what Samhain is really about. And to be honest, I look forward to this time of year because it's a deepening, it's an invitation into the deepening of not just the world, but ourselves.
Well, just as always, we always end up in very interesting conversations before we ever hit record. And we were reflecting on what this time of year kind of begs of us. And going into the winter months, we were kind of reflecting on that. It's like winter months, you're kind of forced in, you're forced to hibernate, forced to go in, forced to maybe have indoor projects, but really just to be still. And so this transition of the seasons is that transition into stillness. And so doing the things and preparing yourself for that transition into the stillness of life and whatever that means for you. Obviously, most people still have to do 9 to 5 or do their jobs. Like the jobs don't stop. The job is like all year round. You're doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
finding that way to bring the seasonal changes into your life, even when life doesn't allow us to necessarily live that way anymore.
Totally. What about you, Jacob? Did you grow up with like a Halloween centric family in America? Or when did you sort of move from the commercial Halloween into the deepening of
Well,
its?
that's the thing, as the transition of Halloween in the States, and I definitely want to come back to you and like how Halloween exists here in the UK. Because fun fact actually, this has been a nice transition with with my channel personally. Is almost half my audience now is from the UK. When
Whoa.
originally my audience was like 80% American, if not more than that. And now, yeah, it's like 40% of my audience now is from the UK. So it is kind of like a merging, very representative of the podcast too, an American New Age pagan with someone from the old world, discussing these things coming together.
From the old world.
From the
I
old
love
world,
that.
yes.
She's from the past.
Yeah, I mean, look what you're wearing right now. You're from the past. But yeah,
I could have thought that.
as an American, Halloween is something that like everyone kind of does. I think it is typically more of an American holiday. From what I understand, it is becoming bigger over here again. And that is kind of ironic, is that it started from the Irish and the Scottish immigrants coming to America and bringing Samhain, well, All Hallows Eve traditions, and those becoming Halloween eventually. And like around the 1950s, basically after World War II, a lot of people started having kids afterwards, and Halloween became a big holiday. And it
Yeah.
didn't take long for Halloween to become the plastic commercialism that we know now. And
Yeah.
as an American growing up with it, that's all you know. You don't really know the real Halloween. You might get a little bit of that. You know, there might be some whispers, at least, you know, me growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s of, oh, the witches and the brew, you know, and hocus pocus and stuff. But it was never taken seriously, at least not in a mass level. So mostly it's still go buy your outfit at the Halloween store. It's, you know, cheap plastic crap that you're going to throw away, and you're going to go get the mass produced commercial candy, and you love it because it's amazingly fun. Of course, it's like, you know, the most fun child holiday of all the holidays, because it's really, I think Halloween's mostly about the kids. And then in the 2000s, it seems that the importance of Halloween to adults has increased. And there's a lot more adults having Halloween themed parties. And a lot of adults actually kind of trick or treating still. Like that's becoming more of a thing, as adults trick or treating. Very
Really?
strange. Yeah, like
I'm up
Halloween
for
seems to be, yeah,
that.
yeah. And so, yeah, it just seems like Halloween, it was originally kind of like the kid holiday. Now it's kind of transitioning more, and some more adults are getting into it. And it seems to be,
Mm.
it's coming over from more in places like the UK. But I don't think in a lot of the rest of Europe it's that big, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of Europe actually. Yeah, it makes sense that America would have taken it from England and then run with the commercialized aspect, because by then it would have been the Christianized All Hallows Eve,
Yeah.
the thing
I'm gonna do a little side research here for a second. What's like growing up in the UK, is Halloween or trick or treating big when you were growing up?
It was, it is, it was, and I don't know if I don't remember hearing many last year, actually. Like, I don't think we're getting many kids trick or treating anymore. Maybe because there's a lot of scaremongering about knocking on random people's doors and asking for sweets. I mean, it's kind of like a setup, isn't it, for things to go wrong with your children. But in the 90s, it was a really big thing. I remember being really annoyed that my parents weren't on board with it as much as my other friends' parents were. Um, which actually maybe is fair, because maybe it is kind of mean to be knocking on old ladies' doors. I don't know. But what one thing I've kind of realized about the commercialization of it is how deliberate that is.
Mm.
Because if you look at the kind of iconic things, there's like the skeleton, the ghost, the witch, and all of these things are like caricatures of what was originally Gwyneth um, the oh gosh, what's her name? Gone blank. The Hag of Winter.
Oh, Kaliak.
The Kiliak, yeah, that's it's believed that the witch became this kind of, it's like a caricatured version of her,
Mm.
and the ghosts obviously are like, and the bones are like the skeletons of the ancestors. But it's all like a real big piss take, isn't it? It's like, how can we make light and fun of this things that's actually a very serious time to connect with ancestors, to
Mm.
connect with the Kaliak, and to honor the sacredness of the land at this time. So for me, it is an interesting kind of mockery of
Mm.
the pagan stuff that's carried on into commercialization.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the key there, is the carry on, because I don't think, you
Mhm.
know, people now are making that decision like, oh, we need to make fun of the Kaliak. Like, no one's
Yeah,
sitting there actively thinking it, but it may have been embedded there
Mhm.
from way back in the day of,
Yeah,
you know, making light of, you know, these pagan traditions when it went into
yeah,
Catholicism.
that's it. It would have been something that was, yeah, it would have been a serious thing like back in the day. It's a very serious time to make contact with your ancestors, a very sacred time.
Mm.
But it's interesting, isn't it? All of the things, the kind of, it's, I guess it's a way to stop us looking through the veil when it's thin as well. Like, what would happen, for instance, if we
Yeah.
were in communication with our ancestors? You know, if the whole population of England and America started doing that, would they be as controllable? Would we, you know, it's I
Oh
think
man,
all
we're
of the,
putting the tinfoil hat on. I didn't expect
oh,
that
we're
for this
going there.
conversation.
We're going there.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder, like, this massive disconnect from like getting to sort of not look at life after death, like kind of moving us away from the idea of the other world and making us live in fear of this is your one life, and you know, once you're dead, you're dead, and there's no ancestors to help you on the other side. For me, it's almost an ingraining of the kind of Christian
Mm.
idea of the one life.
Well, you know, and I actually I counter you there. It's like I don't think, especially well, I think originally with the moving into All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, that was the idea of moving people more towards this Christian mindset. But now, I was reading an article just today. The I think the largest, it's like in young people, like the largest
Mm.
religious identity in America is atheist. And it's, you know, I would argue that with like consumerism, capitalism, whatever, like this mass production, Coca-Cola and all this, like
Mm.
they want to move people more to an atheistic mindset,
Yeah,
rather
yeah,
than, you know, belief in anything, because, you know, actual belief doesn't sell as much. um
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Actually, that really is the ultimate thing, isn't it? Of like, you live, you die, and that's that. The
yeah.
atheism. Yeah, that's more. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
well,
think you're right.
you live, you pay your taxes, then you die.
Yeah, make sure you pay taxes, folks. That's
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and turn the consumerist wheel as much as you can.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is really interesting because there's, I mean, we sort of think about seasonally what it means as well. The idea of, you know, summer's end. Samhain literally translates as summer's end. So it's those 6 months of the year coming to a close, and the kind of deepening of the 6 months as we come away from the fields allegedly, and we stop working allegedly, and we go into the descent of winter. And that doesn't happen for people because obviously we have to carry on paying our bills and things
Mm,
like that. But for the
yeah.
Celts, November the 1st was New Year. So
Mm,
it was
yeah.
Samhain, which was the end of summer, but then you go into New Year's Day, which is not January, it's actually November the 1st.
I did
So
see, I can't verify this right now, but I saw someone post the other day on Instagram that this time of year would have also been the new year for the Scandinavians as well.
interesting.
Yeah. Because there was something
Yeah.
with like the name of a month meaning like new year and new birth or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think we got into that with the autumn equinox as well, is discussing the fact that, you know, winter, autumn really didn't exist to the ancient Celts. It was summer
Yeah.
and winter. And
Yeah.
as I'm sure we said in the podcast, and I know I've said in videos and definitely in conversations, especially now that I'm back in England, is you can see why they only had autumn and or summer and winter.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. It's a real thing, isn't it?
Yeah, like if you didn't have like, sure, like you have the new buds, the new life, but then you have like the autumn leaves. But when you actually look like the weather, like you have like your 2 months, maybe 1 month of summer, and then like, oh, the sun's here, and then it's like cloudy and rainy, and it's like that for the rest of the year.
Oh no, it's rough. It is rough. It really is.
Yeah, but I love it here.
No. Yeah. And actually, it does feel quite fitting that we're approaching Samhain. Like, I don't know how it feels where you are, but in Glastonbury, the veil feels like it's getting very, very thin here. There's
Hmm.
this kind of, I mean, it maybe it's also to do with serotonin levels dropping, and we become more introvert and more inward. But there's definitely a
Oh,
feeling of as you sat in the dark.
yeah, I don't, I hate these kind of lights, but I was really tired of being blind
Yeah.
by the
Okay.
brilliance of the screen.
Worth it for the showbiz. Now you're lit.
Yeah, yeah. She just
Um,
say, now I'm lit.
now you're lit. Ooh. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh, the veil getting thin. Yeah, I've been feeling the last couple of weeks this kind of almost an uncanny desire to daydream almost constantly. Even when people are talking directly to me, I'm kind of not really here. Like I'm sort of traversing in and out of the liminal
Are you there, Kubi? Can you hear me?
somewhat. So I've got notes today so I can anchor the conversation a bit. Because yeah, I really feel it, and we all do in Glastonbury. Really, a lot of people are speaking about how liminal the energy feels, as though the veil is getting quite thin, and it's quite easy to go into trance states and lucidity. So
Mm.
I don't know if you're experiencing that much.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. This like I'm in a weird spot in general. Yeah, after the Vision Quest, I'm in a weird spot, and that's again something you and I were talking beforehand. Is
Mm.
for me, and I do, you know, this kind of terminology of like entering the underworld and people being in the underworld, and I think this time of year is, you know, natural to kind of slip you into that. Obviously, people could be at different stages of their healing journey, their personal journey, but this time of year, like if you're kind of, it's got a gravitational pull towards that. And
Mhm.
so for me, definitely like the autumn in general, as far as entering the underworld. I do feel very much in the underworld of life. Um, but that's okay because that's the part of the natural progression. It's a part of a cycle. And what comes
Yeah.
after the underworld is the rebirth.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really lovely invitation inwards, isn't it? It's yeah. I think it's really beautiful because it's as we go more inwards, then we can feel our feelings more, and we can think more, we can reflect more. But then it's also that time where, I mean, they say the veil grows thin twice a year. So Beltane is the first time the veil grows thin, but that's more so that the Fae can communicate through
Mm.
the veil with us, whereas Samhain tends to be more for the ancestors to come through.
Oh, that
Um,
sounds an awful lot like my new book, A Glastonbury Tourist.
oh, what a shameless plug.
Yes, yes, yes. If only there was a book that discussed Samhain and Beltane traditions and the thinning of the veil, all in one convenient 400-page thing, which you could purchase to support a starving artist like myself. Anyways, that book is called A Glastonbury Tourist, out now on Amazon. You should totally pick one up.
Absolutely shameless.
No, this is the game. But truly, that is something. Like the start of this book, that's actually like the front cover of the book is supposed to be Samhain, and the back cover is supposed to be the Beltane fire,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it does take the story takes place between Samhain and Beltane.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
with of course Glastonbury being like a crucial point of that, and that's
Mm.
even like one of the big things in like the Outlander series is the character is obviously able to time travel. That's the main thing of the book, and she's able to do it basically at Samhain and Beltane.
Yeah.
So it's not something that, you know, me as a writer is unique in doing. Like a lot of people recognize that things are definitely weird around Samhain and Beltane.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an odd time. It really is.
Well,
Um,
and
I-
the Mexican Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, is also around the same time.
yeah, interesting, isn't it? Like completely different area of the world, and yet
Yeah, let's see. The Day of the Dead is October 31st to celebrated on November 1st and second through and also through the 31st through the 6th.
that's
So
crazy.
basically
Like
around the same time.
that's so interesting. Like how on earth has that merged culturally?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
You
and
know?
somebody like we as humans just detect that. Like there has to be
Yeah,
something there. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, have you like ever managed to get in contact with any of your ancestors around Samhain? Like, have you ever done rituals that sort of are designed to invoke that connection whilst the veil is thin?
Yeah. So 2 Samhains ago, I did a ceremony. It was pretty intense. So it was like my first trip to Scotland. There's a place called the Corrimony Burial Cairn, and supposedly in that
Mhm.
burial cairn was a like a seeress or a witch, because it was a female that was buried there, and it was a lot of quartz crystals and stuff. So a lot of people, and she was the only one buried there. So for a fact, for a woman being buried 5,000 years ago on her own with quartz crystals, they're like she was probably magical in some way.
Probably going on there.
Yeah. And so what I did is after visiting there, I went back to the States, and around Samhain time, I did a ceremony where I recreated the burial mound with
Mm.
sticks. And then I dug a hole in the center of it, and I sat there and I did rune pools for people while they came in and gave offerings to the spirits of the dead.
Oh.
Um, yeah. And then we also did that in tandem with a lot of like offerings to the death gods and things like that. And there was
Mm.
definitely a lot of really interesting like energies and experiences for everyone that night. And just in general, just a very the entire event had like an air of death to it, which in a good
Mm.
way, you know.
And did you find people's ancestors were coming through that ritual? Like, was that something that came about,
Not
or?
I think for other people more so. When I do ceremonies, I typically am too nervous a lot of the times. Like I know the mechanicals of what I'm doing for people, but you know, I'm not as good as far as like the actual like, you know, feeling something for somebody else. At least definitely
Yeah.
not back then. I'm better about that now. But a lot of people got a lot of ancestral stuff out of that ceremony. You know, as far as like the rune pools and everything.
That's very cool. And but what were who were the gods that you were invoking? You said there was a few death gods and things.
Yeah.
You have
So let's see. I
who would be
think
your key Norse or Viking gods of the dead?
Yeah, so there's quite a few, because there's a theory that like all the afterlives, like all gods have a different afterlife. Like if they have a hall, they
Mm.
have an afterlife you can go to. But the main death gods, of course, being Hel, Odin, Freya, Aegir, and Ran, which are the ocean death gods. Technically, Thor is a death god because it's supposedly like his hall the dead servants go to.
Okay.
And then and so Odin and Freya, obviously gods of the slain warriors, are the spirits of the slain warriors, and then Hel is like everybody else.
Mm.
And so those are the main ones, but then we also had like a funeral pyre for Balder, because Balder goes to Hel. He's like a god that goes to the underworld. And then I think there's also, we did one for Hermund, which is another god that travels to the afterlife as well. So
Mm.
there's a lot of traveling to the afterlife within Norse myth.
That's so cool. And do you feel like the traveling, would you say is traveling is the same as the other world and the underworld, or do you think it is actually more like they go to their next incarnation?
There's my personal theory, then there's what is mostly commonly accepted. And my this is could open up a whole bag of things that I've been thinking about a lot
Hang
lately.
on, let me get my cup of tea. 1 second. It
Yeah, yeah,
sounds,
yeah,
I want to be
yeah.
fully present.
Okay, fully ready. So, and I'll be curious if you agree with this. My personal viewpoint lately is I believe the Celtic side of things is more animistic, and that
Mm.
the Norse is more polytheistic. And so, in a polytheistic belief system, you have more of an identity of solidified afterlives. Like I said, there's different halls of the dead. Like if you
Mm.
die doing this, you go here. And
Yeah.
I think we only have so much of that information that survives. Warriors go here, servants go here, people that died at sea go here, people that die of sickness go here. Like there very clearly is like labeled places you go when you die. And I think that's more akin to a polytheistic belief system. Whereas in the
Mm.
Celtic, there is just the other world. There is just our
Yeah.
world and the spirit world, which to me calls to more of an animistic belief system.
Oh, I like that. And I think you're right, because I mean, what I love about the North side of things, it's very organized, isn't it? That's what I like, is that you know where you're going, there's clear directions, very organized system. Good, love it. Whereas with the other world, I mean, it's interesting because another word for the other world is Anwin, or it's
Mm,
pronounced Anuvan, actually. That's the correct pronunciation, but it's spelled Anwin. And that actually means the deep place.
mm,
And I think that's a much better descriptive word for it than the other world. It's like this deeper place that you can access within yourself. And it's a deep place that's all around and part of the psyche. Um, and the descriptions of it sound just like, trips I've had with plant medicine. So I'm
mm.
sure it's the place that you access through trance-like states,
Yeah,
or when your brain goes into theta, which
yeah,
that does make more sense, that it is more about animism. It's more about the life force within everything, um, and the way that the world can kind of animate through us, if
yeah.
that makes sense. Um, yeah, interesting. I've not really thought about the difference between those two, but that is a really, really valid point you've just made there.
Yeah, and there's another layer to that, and that's why I say, like, there's my theory, and then there's like the scholars' theory. And the problem with what was recorded about the Norse is that they heavily grafted it onto their knowledge of the Roman and Greek pantheons. And so
Yeah.
the Norse belief system could have actually been more akin to the Celtic, which I think it probably was. But due to the fact of the people who were recording about it, they grafted it so much onto their knowledge of Christianity and Greco-Roman
Mm.
beliefs that it appears more polytheistic. And when you look at, like, especially the Victorian writers, they were very much taking, the Norse beliefs and grafting them on even further.
Yeah.
So a lot of the research was done in the Victorian period. And so I think a lot of our understandings of the Norse pantheon come from this kind of combining of ideas.
Mm.
Especially when you look at something like the Gundestrup cauldron,
Yeah.
one of the few depictions of Count Nunos, and it was found in Denmark. And that's very interesting to me. And then you start looking at the art styles of Denmark, of Sweden, of Norway, and comparing them with Scotland, and Ireland and England, and you start seeing there's a lot more similarities than there are differences. And so
Mm.
I believe personally that there was a point in history that the Celtic and the Scandinavian were much closer related than we realize, but we
Definitely.
lost that information.
Definitely. There are so many overlap. When you start exploring the folklore of actually the Greek pantheon, the Norse pantheon, and the Celtic pantheons, all of those folklore myths and stories have massive overlaps
Mhm.
where you're like, these guys were talking, or that they traveled over. I mean, of course, like the Greeks would have then traveled over and become the Celts at some point. They would have all come from that Indo-European
Yeah.
kind of subgroup originally anyway.
You want
So
to you want a tinfoil hat moment?
go on.
So
Go
something
on.
I read this into a video in a few weeks because I talk about meditation and yoga and fasting and stuff like that. But in the yoga video, I suggest that there actually is a possibility that the Celts were actually practicing some form of yoga. Um, because if you think about it, the Indo-European migrations, when they started, was at the time that yoga was being developed in the Indus River Valley.
Does this mean I'm gonna have to start doing yoga, Jacob? Tell me no. I'm not into that.
Is that not your
Too
hippie thing?
bendy for me.
It's too. Oh, that's right. You can't bend it. You can't touch your toes, can you?
I can't touch my toes.
Oh
No,
yeah,
and
I forgot.
I don't even run for buses. I'm a very, very lazy person, blessed with a high metabolism.
You're like a plank of wood.
I know. I don't move, all right? All my traversing is inward.
Come on. All right, we'll start right here. You know.
No, not doing it.
Yeah, but I bring that up, and then it's like, but then you look at the Gunderstrup cauldron, and you see that Cernunnos is in a cross-legged pose with two things in his hand, and then you look at our only depiction of Freyr, like the Norse goddess fertility, and he's cross-legged with a huge erection, and it's like, hold on, and you start looking at these, it's like these are more connected to like these Indo-European things, so maybe the early Celts, the Druids were doing some downward dogs.
Oh my God, can you imagine? In their white robes with their little legs in the air and goodness. I mean, I always think there's a high chance that they could all have come from the ancient Egyptian, the Hermetic kind of knowledge anyway, that it all then got, you've heard the other theory about that's come from the Colburn. Have you heard of that? So this is
No,
an
I don't think so.
interesting, it's very, this is a real tin hat book. Because there's no evidence of like, was it actually an ancient book or not? But it's considered the Celtic Bible, and half of it's written by the Celts and half of it's written by ancient Egyptian writers. And it's believed that it was rescued from the Great Fire of Alexandria and then spread out across the world in different areas. And the Druids would have taken some of that and traveled over and preserved the knowledge. And it was allegedly preserved in this book called the Colburn, spelt Kolbrin, and hidden in Glastonbury Abbey, actually, by some monks. I'm reading it at the moment.
Of course, it was in
It's always
Glastonbury Abbey.
Glastonbury. It's always Glastonbury. But it's a really interesting book because it does kind of bridge the gap of knowledge there of like how these things might have traveled over and how all these ancient kind of philosophies have these overlaps. But yeah, it's an interesting one. You're looking at it now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I always like checking things out.
I've got it here. It's just some light bedtime reading at the moment.
Oh yeah, super light. You know what else is some light bedtime reading? A Glastonbury Tourist by Jacob Tussin.
We're meant to do commercials every 10 minutes, not every
yeah,
3.
when I went to the store before this episode, I bought some Guinness, and I was like, oh, by the way, have you heard of Glastonbury Tourist by Jacob Tussin? I just carried it around with me everywhere, like.
we should take a shot for every time Jacob holds up the book in this podcast.
Someone recommended that in my sauna video, sauna. I say sauna a lot, and someone's like, take a shot every time he says sauna. Like, you would die within the first 5 minutes. You would just be dead. I usually say it like 50 times in the beginning of that episode.
Oh my God, so funny. But yeah, so back to Samhain.
That's what we're talking about.
Back on track with these sort of gods that overlap. So you've kind of got the lot from the Norse pantheon there, and I would say the Celtic gods. We've got Gwynedd Neath, who is tied specifically to Glastonbury. Actually, there's a little bit of writing about a Christian monk, I believe, or a Christian saint throwing holy water at Gwynedd Neath and his ghostly hounds as he rode out from underneath Glastonbury Tor on the eve of Samhain. So that's that is normally a procession that happens here, but they're not doing it this year. They normally parade Gwynedd Neath down the high street in a chariot with his hounds and the keepers of the dead, all the ancestors. And his thing is that he's meant to round up the dead with the dead ancestors and take them back to the entrance of the underworld, which is Glastonbury Tor. That's
Mm.
pretty creepy.
Yeah. So
So
what is
he's from
typically done
yeah.
in Samhain, in Glastonbury?
Well, we've got our normal, there'll be a sunrise ceremony at the Tor on the morning of Samhain. And then we've got the White Spring. They normally do a little ritual in there, which is the entrance of the other world. So that's pretty major. Chalice Well normally do their midday meditation and a ceremony beneath the yew trees, which is beautiful because the yew trees, and I mean there's so many yew trees in Chalice Well. We're so lucky to have them, but they feel like, the keepers of ancestral wisdom to me. If there was a Halloween tree, I would definitely say it's the yew tree. So that's quite beautiful. But other than that, what you tend to find is it's more about the people that you know in Glastonbury this time of year. Like a lot of covens will gather, a lot of witchy people will gather and do the deep work, which is to, use the thinning of the veil to sort of build offerings towards the ancestors as we get closer to the Samhain portal. So you start making your offerings on the altar and try and forge connections with the ancestors. And then on the eve of Samhain, you put yourself into a trance, either with a coven or by yourself. And that can be through drumming, dancing, plant medicine, meditation, journaling, perhaps, whatever your jam is, and trying to forge or channel or connect with the ancestors through the veil whilst it's thin. So that's what I'll be doing anyway. I tend to just do a lot of altar work around this time of year and try and build those connections.
So that actually is a good segue, because I did ask some questions just in like a post what people would have for this episode. And like one of the first questions here is, what are simple ways to celebrate or small acts someone can do to celebrate Samhain?
Oh, lovely. So maybe like the sort of things you might want to set up on your altar, you might want to change it to things like pumpkins, bones. So if you've got any animal bones, antlered sort of stag bones or anything like that. Um, any photos of your ancestors, so grandparents that you know were safe, that you can make contact with on the other side. So the Celts really believed that when people crossed over, it wasn't really a time to grieve. You just had an ally on the other side,
Hmm.
and that was actually quite favorable for the tribe. Because if you could have someone that you really trusted in this life, in the other world, then that formed a really strong allegiance, and you could do work with the other world realms quite easily. So like I try and work with my grandmothers, both of them on both sides. One of them, my dad has a story about how she used to do a Ouija board with the children in the neighborhood. And my dad, I just thought, wow, how great is that?
Yeah.
She's great. And my nan on my mother's side, who I don't think she was such a spiritual lady, but she's someone I felt incredibly safe with as a child. And so I go to both of the women around Samhain and I try and make some connections. And those connections can be things like putting a photo of them on your altar. It can be offering honey mead. It can be invoking the gods of the dead. So it would be Gwynedd Neath. You might want to make connections with the Cailleach, who is the heralds in the winter season. But it can also be things like the Morrigan for the Celts as well. They kind of work closely with death.
Well, and the Dagda and the Morgan are connected as Samhain, right? They have the holy union.
Right.
Yeah.
They do, of course. Yeah, that's more sort of winter solstice, isn't it? Do you mean with the literal, like that's when they conceived, wasn't it? I think something like
I
that.
thought it was at Samhain.
Oh, maybe it's Samhain. I might be wrong there, actually,
Yeah, because I
Jacob.
just did my research with for the Samhain video, and I'm pretty sure.
Oh, no, I think you're right. I think it is Samhain. So yeah, you could even bring their union into the altar space as well. And it might just be things like writing letters to them. It might be singing to them, speaking out loud to them, praying to them, and trying to form a connection. And then on the eve of Samhain, putting yourself into trance-like state, whether that's, I mean, you can do that with drumming. If you just sober drumming for half an hour and then letting yourself go into the trance and ask your ancestors to guide you or to answer questions that you might have. Or it can also be a time of giving thanks to your ancestors, like thanking them for paving the way for who you are today and what you have and all that you've inherited. And it can also be a time of asking them to help you with personal ties. So if you've got like behavior patterns in yourself that you want to remove that were perhaps inherited through the generational lines, things like PTSD, things
Hmm.
like that can be, you can work with your ancestors through that stuff. So
Yeah.
it can be a really, really potent time.
Something I forgot to mention, we had one of my events since between now and the previous episode, I believe.
Oh,
And one of the
yeah.
things we did, I don't know how much I was telling you about it could be, but like the spear dance that I was told about at the Vision Quest. I don't remember. I think I told you a little bit about it, that I was basically told, like, here's how to do the spear dance, and you need to teach other people to
Yeah.
do it. And
Yes,
so
yeah,
we
yeah.
we got to do the first iteration of that at this last event we did. This was back basically on the equinox, so it was like right after our last episode, and we had about 12 people all doing the spear dance together, and it
Oh,
was
amazing.
a really funny part about it, though. We actually didn't get to do the ritual. We did the practice for it, but even the practice was enough, to actually sit there and go through the motions. It was really trance inducing. Like, whoa.
Mm.
Like there was a point, like, I had the spear and I was like kneeling down and like standing up and doing the incantation and everything. And I was like looking across the dude that was also doing it. I was like, holy shit. He was like, holy shit. And so there's definitely
Wow.
something to like doing, for me, this is relatively new, like doing some kind of repetitive action to induce a trance-like state. We did that when I
Mm.
was there with the trance dancing, but I think this is that'd be a really cool thing. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be sitting at an altar. It can be doing something methodically, repetitively to get yourself
Yeah.
into some form of trance during this time of year.
Definitely. I think that repetition thing is the key. If you're doing something with repetition over and over again, then it gets your conscious thinking mind out of the way. Trance basically is anything that puts your brain from alpha into theta brainwave. So if you could Google different ways to access theta brainwave. There's lots of different things you can do to invoke that
Mm-hmm.
tend to be based around kind of repetitive behaviors or creative behaviors. So automatic writing and art actually also puts you into theta brainwave. And it's that state that allows, yeah, that's when you start accessing the other world, really. That's what we're talking about. It's like tuning your brain to a different vibration and frequency
Yeah.
so that you can access that different world, I think.
Yeah.
That's basically how
Um,
I make sense of it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of answers the I was looking through the other questions. A lot of them were about how to take advantage of the
Mhm.
thinning of the veil. And it seems like, a good one is, to do things that induce a trance state, because it's going to be even
Mm.
easier to achieve that trance state during this time of year.
Oh, massively so. Yeah, if you can't already feel it, I mean, you could probably tune into it a little bit because they say it's sort of 7 days before and 7 days after. So we're
Mm,
sort of accessing that realm now, and everything does feel a little bit kind of daisy and hazy.
yeah.
It's getting more and more lucid, which is great.
And it's just
Um,
getting more bloody dark.
yeah. Also, I have there was a really great article that I read by Philip Carr-Gomm, who is the old leader of the Order of Druids and Bards and Obod in England, and he's quite a reliable source
Mm,
of well researched things. And he talks about an old tradition which used to be called the Dumb Banquet, which obviously isn't very PC anymore. So forgive me, but it means to go into silence. Um, so a silent banquet is a more
mm,
appropriate way of saying it. And he talks about a ritual that the Druids do to this day, where they invite everybody in to feast, and they bring bread and honey and a big meal, and everybody has a plate that they prepare for themselves and a plate next to them for their ancestor, and they
yeah.
invite the ancestors in through an open window. Um, and I think they give things like juniper and vervain. So those are sort of old druidic plants that we used to see through the veil as offerings to the fire. And they throw in bread, honey, salt, and wine into the fire. And they ask the ancestors to feast with them. And then everybody sits in silence whilst they eat. And I presume that's the moment where, in that
Mm,
silence of eating, they feel the presence of their ancestors with them. And then at
Yeah.
the end, I think they take yew leaves for protection, and they close the windows back as part of the ritual. So it's that almost like creating an opportunity or a moment in time for the ancestors to all
Yeah.
come in and then invite them all to leave at the end. So it has to be done safely, I think, because you don't want
Yeah.
any old Joe flying in through the window, you know.
Yeah. Oh, it's nearly headless Nick.
We told him last year that he couldn't come. He got wasted.
um, yeah, I think that it is really interesting because when I'm doing like the shamanic studies and things like that, it's always important to reference like you want to meet helpful ancestor spirits.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly everyone has ancestor spirits that are bad or good or helpful or not helpful, or don't care about you. So it is interesting because our pool of ancestors is so big,
Yeah.
and so you do have to be a little bit selective. For me personally, I feel I encounter kind of like the embodiment of multiple ancestors often, like,
Mhm.
and sense of like grandfather spirits. Like, it's not necessarily a singular grandfather, it's an amalgamation of multiple grandfather spirits in one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, you do have to be, there has to be like a level of discernment used, I think, doesn't there? When you're working with the deep things, when you're going into the other world, remember, it's the Anwind, it's the deep place. It's,
Mm.
it does need a level of caution because,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of beings and deities in the other world. So, yeah, going in with protection as well and going in with your ancestors to guide you is really key, I think.
Yeah. I think some advice to kind of hit on as well, since we kind of started the conversation with Halloween,
Mm.
is just in general, like celebrating this time of year, and this is something I've been recommending in my videos coming around about around this same time, is like celebrating Halloween, like do that, enjoy it, but try to do it in a natural way. Of if you're
Yeah.
going to go out and dress up, make your own outfit rather than going and buying the plastic one. It wasn't that long ago that's what was being done. Like we've been kind of implanted with this idea that it's always been this way. This is incorrect. It was
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
60, 70 years ago, people were hand making their Halloween outfits. And that's the way it was for thousands of years, probably.
Yeah. Actually, that's such a good point. There's like probably an element of ritual within the crafting of your own
Mm.
Halloween outfits, isn't there? Like the idea of it's almost like creating a ceremonial outfit, if you
Yeah.
think about it. You know, you're invoking your ancestors, really, and you're putting on an outfit in order to do so. It's quite a sacred thing. You don't want to be getting it from like Amazon.
Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah.
trust Jeff Bezos with your protection during this time of year? But you know what
Yeah.
you can trust Jeff Bezos with when producing new books like the Glastonbury Tours. Out now on Amazon.
Get the
Thank
shot.
you.
So
Now,
funny.
just to ask you, because I'm curious of your thoughts on this, like this
Mm.
thing, that comes up anytime you start doing research on Samhain, and the idea of like outfits and costumes and the reason people wore them, when the guising,
Mm.
and it seems that it was always to protect oneself from spirits.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, if you look more into the Old English folklore, it is more about meeting the spirit world with something equally as terrifying so that they are too scared to come near your house. So it's almost a way of scaring them off. But
Yeah.
that's a post-Christianized idea.
Mm.
So I think if we'd have gone further back, obviously we see a lot of the time we see the reversal of things in
Mm.
Christianity. So the opposite of that, I imagine our ancestors would have worn these outfits as a way to invoke the ancestors rather than to scare them off.
Yeah, the way I kind of perceived it is it's like you're becoming a part of the other world. And so
Yeah,
dressing as you would within the other world. Like if you're having a party and the other world is invited and you're coming and you're both meeting for the party, you're trying to dress like them in a
yeah,
way. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the perfect disguise to gain access.
Yeah, because I always
Um,
think that like when I went to the cave of Owen the Gat in Ireland, which is supposedly like the origin of Halloween, like the first Samhain took place there. And you look at like the actual story, it's like the hero Nira went into the cave and he got a fairy wife. And then like it's there that he was warned that the Queen Maeve was going to get attacked on Samhain. And so he leaves the fairy world to go tell her like, hey, you're about to be attacked. and like saves her. But then he goes back to the fairy world. He's like, no, I had a fairy wife back there. I'm going back. And then he goes back to be with
Oh,
the fairies. And
oh,
I always
how's
hear
that
these
for
stories.
romance?
Right. Yeah. And I there's like another story in like Scotland of like, and this is a Christian era story of like
Mm.
a young lad going out and getting himself a fairy wife and having a big fairy feast. And he's like, oh, I'm in love with this. It's just eating all the food. It's delicious. And his mother shows up and she's like, what are you doing? Get out of there. The fairies are gonna capture you forever. He's like, but mom, I want to be a part of the fairies. They gave me a wife. They gave me food. Why would I not want to be a part of the fairies?
I love that. Literally, the only two things it takes is
Yeah.
food and a fairy wife, and he's sold.
Like,
Forget his
but
mum and his former
that's what
life.
I'm saying. It's like, why is this a bad thing? Like, these stories like, oh, the fairies are going to get you. It's like, it sounds like they give me a wife. They feed me well. Why would I ever leave?
Well, there's quite a few stories actually of that, isn't there? There's the tale of young Tam Lin. I think that's around Samhain, isn't it? About a woman that she falls in love with a fairy male rider and gets sort of captured into his world or something like that. It rings a bell. But yeah, that might be a thing to remember. So if you do encounter any of the spirit world on Samhain, to not eat food, unless, of course, you do want, well, unless they offer you a fairy husband or a wife and
Or
unlimited
both.
food, or both.
This is 21st century. It could be both.
why? Why would you? But yeah, that's to be wary of that. Don't take anything that they give you, even if it's really yummy.
Take it.
It's the contract. They don't tell you about that, but the cake is contract in the fairy realm.
Well, I thought it was, again, I thought that was a Christian era thing, and really what it is you're supposed to exchange something. Is if you're given a
Oh,
gift from the fairies, it's like the Christians are like, oh, don't take it, because they forgot how to receive because they stopped giving. And so what it really was is like, no, the fairies are here. They're here to give you gifts. It's just you're supposed to give one in return. And if you greedily take one, that's when it's bad.
ah, that's an interesting take on it. I wonder also if it's a little nod to the psychedelic mushrooms again as well. Of don't
Hmm.
eat anything from their realm. They always grow in these kind of woodlandy areas.
So you were telling me you don't eat the psychedelic mushrooms?
I absolutely do eat the
But you always like leave a little something, like, I was out. The
God,
reason
no,
we didn't have our
actually,
last episode is because there were some psychedelic mushrooms involved.
no, actually, there's one thing I can't be trusted with. It's picking my own mushrooms. It's just there's too many out there that look similar to poisonous ones. Yeah, not those.
Yeah, yeah.
But I wonder if it is something, a little nod to that. I wonder if it goes back to that because those mushrooms would have been there then at this time of year, of course, as well.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's obvious, isn't it? It's too
No,
obvious.
not to, incriminate myself, but it was really interesting. Near a Roman fort nearby to where I am currently, there was a lot of psychedelic mushrooms growing. And it made me wonder, it's like, were these Romans out here tripping balls? Because I mean, it literally like Roman fort hill mushrooms.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's like, I wonder why they chose that spot.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
These guys were onto something here. Or
Are
at the
you
very
gonna?
least, they didn't know about it. They didn't know about it, and they're, just having a nice cup of mushroom soup in the evening, and then they're
Oh, what
meeting
a
the
surprise!
fairies.
Can you imagine how that would have gone down? Oh my goodness.
Well, it was a
Um,
thing. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, we would never know this, but one of the things that the people of South America did when the conquistadors came is they would try to spike their drinks with ayahuasca to scare them.
really?
Yeah, so
Oh,
they
it would
would like.
certainly do that. Imagine that unexpectedly tripping
Right.
them
Yeah.
up.
You're not, especially you're like this Catholic conquistador coming to, the new world, and, you're having your nice little cup of, Spanish tea or whatever. And then you're just like hardcore tripping balls. You're meeting a Jaguar spirit. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. So maybe it's not that, when they talk about these things that there's evil spirits over there, it's maybe that they were confronting
Yeah.
these things within themselves from tripping.
Well, you have to imagine too, like you have someone that is there to destroy and someone who's there to conquer. And then they take a
Mm.
medicine of the realm. Like it's not going to be a pleasant experience.
Yeah. That is not the right environment to be tripping in.
No,
That's
do
not the
not
right
trip
setup.
while conquering.
Disclaimer. Will not go well.
Yeah, and again, maybe this is, with the whole like don't eat anything from the fairies, like from the fairy world, is
Yeah.
these are stories being told by the conquerors, by or like the converters, is,
Yeah.
oh, don't eat their food because when we eat it, it's bad. It's like, well, maybe it's bad because you're a dick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So true. Gosh. So what about you? You've landed in England now. What are
Yeah,
your plans for Halloween? Or
that's
Samhain,
England
let's
out
call it
there.
Samhain. What are your plans for Samhain? Are you planning on doing anything or going to any ceremonies
um
or
we were looking for a ceremony to do around here, and we couldn't quite find anything. There was a few small things, but nothing that we really trusted enough. Because
yeah.
originally we were supposed to do, there was going to be the whole Welsh retreat, and it just didn't end up not happening. So this is kind of like a free weekend. So we decided we're going to go up and go to Long Meg, which is a stone circle. It's like the second biggest stone circle in England, up in the
Hmm.
Lake District. So we'll go up there and we'll do like probably a little ceremony, nothing too crazy. Mushrooms may or may not be involved, but not sure. But yeah, mostly just visiting ancient sites throughout the day, I believe.
Oh, that sounds like a really nice way to explore it all. That's really nice.
Ooh, and actually,
We're
the reason we chose Long Meg is even though most stone circles are aligned to the solstices and equinoxes, Long Meg is actually aligned to Samhain.
really
Yep.
wow. Hang on. What? So with the rising sun of, is it something like that or?
Yeah, it's just something like I think the main stone like aligns to the rising sun of the Samhain morning or
That's
something.
amazing.
Yeah,
Oh, that's very cool. I've not explored that area yet at all for standing
that's because
stones.
you're a plank of wood that don't leave.
Wow, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
What can you do? Oh my gosh. We're doing a little ceremony here. Me and my good brother here, Loki, from Glastonbury. We do our monthly ceremonies with the people in Glastonbury. So we're having a little walk through the woods with some candles and some lanterns, and we're going to get people to bring or to collect the bones of their ancestors. Not literally. We're getting them to pick up like white stones and rocks on the way, or something that feels like it could represent an ancestor.
Hmm.
And then we're going to get them all sat around a big fire, and they're going to bring the bones of their ancestor one at a time to the fire around it, and
Hmm.
it's going to be like a metaphor for inviting the ancestors in, and then we're going to speak to them, speak on behalf of them, or tell their story and honor them.
Yeah.
um and then normally ends up with a bit of a raucous passing around of mead and some fiddle playing and things like that, and a little bit of a jam
Sounds a good
session.
time.
Yeah, so that should be nice if the weather's good, which hopefully it will be. It'll be nice.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
good. No, I'm sad I couldn't be there for Samhain. It was definitely something I was thinking about, but I'm excited to make it back to Glastonbury as well.
I know, not long
And
now.
enjoy your 6 hours of daylight down there when I get
Ah,
there.
God, no. Yeah, I have to crawl out of the cave slowly. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to think. So to kind of close out this episode, what would be your final piece of advice for people during this time of year? Like, of everything we talked about, what do you think is most
Mhm.
important for the listener today?
I think probably protection. I would really do an emphasis on protection, because with the veil being thin, that means anything can come through, not just your specific ancestors. So I would say, do these rituals and to sort of make contact with the other world, but to do so really safely by making sure you call in your allies and the ancestors that you do actually know. Don't just be taking random ancestor energy in. Um, or maybe making an allegiance with one of them. So form a relationship with one ancestor that you knew in this life, and then get them to introduce you to other safe ancestors on the other side. That would probably be my main bit of advice.
Yeah, protection. And I think that's like we were talking about with the disguising and stuff like that. That's something very practical that still
Yeah,
exists in culture today. Like the reason people dress up for Halloween is because there's a history of protection against the spirits.
yeah, exactly that. Yeah. What would your advice be for Samhain?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of reflecting on myself a bit because I've been really like hammering like work. Like even though I'm really blessed to have a job where I get to talk about things like this. Like this is my job. I get talking about ancient history, religions, gods, spirits, and all that stuff. But as much as I love doing the research and having the conversations, 80% of the actual job is staring at a computer editing all day or writing the book or whatnot. So like it's a lot of just like screens. And I feel that I have been looking at screens too much lately, personally. Like when I'm not on here, I'm on my phone, or on Instagram, or been playing games. Like it actually has, and we're watching TV. And I've noticed that actually a lot of my waking hours these days has been looking at a screen. And I don't think there's any faster way to feel disconnected than looking at screens all the time. And so I personally, over the next couple of weeks leading up into Samhain, I think I really want to decrease my screen time so that I can take advantage, because you're talking like, oh, I'm starting to feel it. And like there was a part of me that's like, holy shit, I'm not able to feel it right now because I'm so in my head, I'm so in work. And so that would be my advice to everyone, because I know a lot of people out there feel very similar, is that work's in the way, life is in the way. So start reflecting on the things that you can change within your life to take advantage of this time of the year to the fullest, because it is a magical time, and it is a shame when we miss it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Like slowing it down to feel it all, to actually feel it.
Yeah, definitely. After like it's 7 o'clock as we're recording this like right now. So basically after this, download the video, and then I'm just gonna kind of disconnect from the rest of the night. Yeah, because I mean shit. I know I'm in a weird spot when the last thing I do when I go to bed is I'm looking at my damn phone, and then the first thing I see in the morning, that damn phone. Like that is, and it's so scary how much it slips into your life so quickly.
I know, and we're all so guilty of it, I think.
Yeah.
Like that's the horrible thing. I definitely have it as well. Yeah. Goddamn phones taking over our lives.
I know. And now I got 2 goddamn phones because I had to come here, and the phone I had didn't work here, so I had to get another phone. Well, like I had a backup phone, like an old iPhone, and so I have to have that with my SIM card in it, and the other one's my work phone. So no, I got 2 of these goddamn things.
Double trouble.
Double trouble. I'm just like double fisting these damn phones. I got YouTube on one, Reels on the other one.
Oh dear. Well, there we go. That can be a goal for everyone, including all the people that are watching this on mobile phones right now.
Shut it off. Turn it off.
Just get rid of this. Throw it out the
window. But thank you everyone so much for joining us for this episode. And if you're looking for a non-phone activity to do, you should check out the Glastonbury Tours by Jacob Tossin. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode of the Tree of Life podcast. And thank you so much. Good night.